From our State House studio in Montgomery, I'm Todd Stacy. Welcome to Capitol Journal. It's August, and we're now in the dog days of summer, which sometimes means slow news weeks. After the last month we've had in politics, that's not exactly a bad thing. This week in the State House, lawmakers and policymakers gathered to discuss blockchain technology, cryptocurrency, and what steps the state might need to take to protect consumers from fraud. The Alabama Blockchain Study Commission brought together industry leaders and regulatory agencies to explore how the state can utilize this emerging technology while protecting consumers. Blockchain technology is the foundation upon which cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin are built. It acts as a secure public ledger that records and verifies all transactions. But the industry is far less regulated than banks, credit unions, and other financial institutions.
It's very important to one degree that we work with crypto companies and make sure that this is a friendly environment for crypto companies. We want them to stay here. There's opportunities for our state, there's sort of traditional opportunities with just employment and how that works, but also just there's advantages to us to be on the forefront of bringing these companies in a positive way. I want the state to be very friendly to blockchain companies, but I also want to make sure our people are protected too.
And so many of these companies that are popping up around cryptocurrency, and it's not the cryptocurrency itself, the transactions peer-to-peer, but the companies that are forming around cryptocurrency that are allowing consumers and investors to apply their assets to certain trades or trading functions, deposit their assets, make loans with these digital assets, receive interest, are not complying with laws that are required of financial institutions in this state.
I think that you look at blockchain and crypto it's a $2 trillion asset class right now. I truly believe within the next 10 years we're looking at it being a 50 to maybe $100 trillion asset class. And right now the question is Alabama going to be able to take advantage of this monumental growth in value? Or are we going to let it pass us by?
And I'll sit down with Alabama Securities Commission Director Amanda Senn to explore this in more detail later in the show. Turning to Washington, U.S. Senator Katie Britt this week introduced bipartisan legislation that aims to help families better afford child care. She's working with Senator Tim Kaine, a Democrat from Virginia, to build support for a proposal that would increase the child and dependent care tax credit to $2,500 for those with one child and $4,000 for those with two or more children. Britt said working parents are facing exceedingly high costs for child care.
I've experienced America's broken child care system firsthand. My husband Wesley and I had our own challenges as we went through the journey as new parents. Challenging might actually be an understatement. I went back to law school and there I was with a newborn and an 11-month-old while Wesley was getting his MBA. Then we moved to Birmingham after school, and we had to spend an astronomical amount of money to send our daughter and our son to childcare. I felt like we were actually writing checks for their college tuition and not for their childcare. Today, these costs are even higher for families across Alabama and across America. When the cost of childcare is that high, parents face the question of whether or not it's financially rational to return to work. And for many, it's not even a question. It's unaffordable and it leaves them with no realistic option. This is where it really becomes an even bigger workforce issue. It is my belief that Congress has a role to play here, and it can and must do something. I'm really proud to come together with Senator Tim Kaine. We have what I believe is an actionable legislative solution to actually help.
Speaking of Senator Britt, she was one of several officials gathering in Mobile this week to celebrate the $550 million grant from the U.S. Department of Transportation that will go toward making the Mobile Bridge and Bayway project a reality. Also gathering for the celebration at Gulf Quest were Governor Kay Ivey, Congressman Jerry Carl, Federal Highway Administrator Shaylin Batt, Mobile Mayor Sandy Stimpson, and Fairhope City Councilman Jack Burrell. He's the chair of the Eastern Shore Municipal Planning Organization. The state has for years sought to build a new I-10 bridge over the Mobile River and replace the Bayway connecting Mobile and Baldwin counties. The current tunnel is a frequent traffic problem, both for local commuters and commercial traffic along the heavily traveled I-10 route. The project will see a 6-lane bridge constructed over the river in downtown Mobile that will connect to an expanded and elevated Bayway into Baldwin County. We've reported before on the shortage of physicians here in the state of Alabama. It's especially acute in the Black Belt and other rural areas. The state's medical association is taking steps to address that shortage. Capital Journal's Jeff Sanders has more.
The pathway to becoming a physician is a challenging, multi-year process filled with many requirements for medical students to officially be called a doctor.
I have seen estimates around 3,000 physicians that we're short in this state.
Mark Jackson is the executive director of the Medical Association of the state of Alabama.
On the primary care side, so we're talking about family medicine, we're talking about pediatrics, general internal medicine. We're looking at 250 to 300 physicians that we're short in this state. That number plays out in a much greater sense in the rural areas of the state.
So to help address the shortage of doctors in Alabama, the legislature passed the Physician Workforce Act back in 2023. Part of that act is the Bridge-Year Graduate Physician Program, which is now accepting applications. It enables medical school graduates who did not secure residency placements to gain valuable experience and skills under the supervision of a licensed doctor.
But it'll allow, again, those medical students to go with a physician, supervised by a physician, to provide, additional manpower in that practice so that they can see patients and, provide care that the physician wouldn't ordinarily have that additional help in seeing those patients.
For more information on the Bridge-Year Graduate Physician Program, you can visit this website, albme.gov, for more information. Reporting for Capital Journal, I'm Jeff Sanders.
This week, Browns Ferry Nuclear Power Plant in Athens, Alabama, celebrated 50 years in operation. The plant generates about 20% of the Tennessee Valley Authority's total electric capacity. The occasion comes amid increased talks nationally about building more nuclear power plants as a clean form of energy to meet growing electricity demands.
We are excited about the last 50 years of operation at Browns Ferry Nuclear Power Plant. When I think about the demand for power in the next 20, 30 years, we have an opportunity to create a new legacy for the next 50 years. When I think about the future of Browns Ferry, what excites me most is the transition of how we do business to the next generation. So we have to teach, we have to mentor, we have to use technology, we have to change how we've done it to almost shepherd the new generation into nuclear. And we're going to invest heavily in the plant's assets to upgrade equipment. We've already started that over the last few years, and it's going to continue. And, I'm really excited about how Browns Ferry is going to support the entire Tennessee Valley for the next decades to come.
Well, ready or not, it's back to school time in Alabama. Some districts have already started class, and most are starting back in the next couple of weeks. The Alabama Department of Public Health is reminding parents to make sure kids are up to date on their shots and healthy when they return to school. Capital Journal's Randy Scott reports.
We recently told you about a tax-free holiday weekend around the state to get parents discounts for buying back-to-school supplies. There's another box to check on their back-to-school list of things to do. This time, it involves health care.
Many of our children, especially children who have to ride the bus, and maybe those that have to ride the bus for long distances, have to get up really early. And that can be a big shock to the system.
Dr. Wes Stubblefield with the Alabama Department of Public Health has a list of pointers to help students and their parents get ready for class.
You have trouble getting up, but the kids don't want to eat, and then they go to school hungry. That can be a problem. That can be an adjustment period.
It's quiet now, but soon that won't be the case for schools across Alabama as the new school year officially starts. Preparing future leaders is what they do, and getting those future leaders ready is what their parents do. So from an educational standpoint and a health standpoint, parents also have work to do.
Children that are on medication, that they are either on at school or on before school. Think about diabetics, those that have ADHD, medications for asthma. All of these things need to be reevaluated. Prescriptions need to be refilled. Forms need to be filled out.
Preparation also includes vaccines.
According to Alabama law, that children need to be vaccinated with a certain minimum number of vaccinations to attend school in Alabama. That's private and public.
Dr. Stubblefield says COVID and flu vaccinations are not required for school entry, but parents should keep a watch as the season gets going.
Some children could be at risk. Other children could be at very high risk because they have underlying medical conditions. So it's important for both the health of your children and the health of the broader community.
The doctor says parents should also consider items dealing with mental health issues.
Children, especially children who have had mental health difficulties in the past, this is yet another reason to make sure that you have those yearly evaluations with your trusted healthcare provider to discuss these issues. Things about previous medications taken, counseling appointments that may have gotten delayed over the summer, moving to a new grade, a new school, previous problems with previous classmates, anything that may have to do with a boyfriend or a girlfriend. There's just lots of things to think about.
In Montgomery, Randy Scott, Capital Journal.
And in the spirit of back to school, Governor Kay Ivey today released a special message for students and teachers returning to the classroom. She encouraged students to study hard and have fun, and she thanked teachers for serving as the backbone of Alabama's education system.
I hope you've had a wonderful summer filled with great fun and plenty of reading and learning. As many of you are returning to the classroom these next few days, I want to share a few words of encouragement. Here in Alabama, we believe that strong students are key to our success. Each one of you has the potential to make a difference, not just in your own lives, but in the future of Alabama and our nation. Your passion for learning is what makes Alabama shine, and I'm looking forward to seeing the enthusiasm and hard work from students all across the state. To our incredible teachers, thank you for your dedication in shaping the minds of our young learners. As you guide and support our students, know that your hard work does not go unnoticed. You are the backbone of our education system, and we are grateful for everything you do. Let's make this school year the best one yet.
Coming up after the break, I'll sit down with State Superintendent Eric Mackey to talk about the new school year. After that, Alabama Securities Commission Director Amanda Senn joins me to discuss that blockchain issue we reported on. And later in the show, Ellen McNair and Bob Smith from the Department of Commerce are in studio to talk about the recent London Air Show and offer an update on the state's economic development. Stay with us.
You can watch past episodes of Capital Journal online anytime at Alabama Public Television's website, aptv.org. Click on the Online Video tab on the main page. You can also connect with Capital Journal and link to past episodes on Capital Journal's Facebook page.
Welcome back to Capital Journal. Joining me next is Dr. Eric Mackey, Alabama Superintendent of Schools. Dr. Mackey, thanks for coming on the show.
I'm glad to be here.
Well, it's good timing because it's back to school time, right?
Yeah, it really is back to school time. And in fact, our first students went back to school earlier this week. So yesterday we had some students going to school.
That's crazy. I guess it just starts earlier and earlier each year. But that's right. I mean, between this week and next week and into August, it's back to school time. So, that's really go time for y'all, right? Walk us through kind of what happens as schools prepare to accept students into this new school year. Maybe some things that we might take for granted.
Sure. So summers are really busy in schools. I can certainly remember my days as a principal and even as state superintendent. In many ways, the summer is more busy than the first few weeks of school for school administrators because so much has to be done. And of course, they're doing a lot of behind the scenes things. You know, we're cleaning schools, we're doing a lot of repairs, a lot of repaving of parking lots went on this summer. So there's so many things that you really don't want to do while there's students on campus, if at all possible. So those things are going on in the summer. Unfortunately, we all know how hot it's been this summer, and we've had to replace a lot of HVAC units. In fact, we've had some schools that they're having a hard time getting all those things up to date and installed. But all in all, we feel pretty good about it. Most of our schools will be starting on time. All of them will be starting by the end of August. And there's a lot of work that goes behind it. And we just ready for students to get back to school and get back to learning.
Is it that same kind of feeling of optimism as the new school year begins about, hey, it's another opportunity to really improve outcomes in terms of education, that optimism that comes with a new school year?
Yeah, I'm more optimistic about this year than any year I've had. This is, you know, in my 7th year as state superintendent, so that's a lot to say. You know, you never know what's going to happen in the year. I was pretty optimistic about the 1920 year, and then, you know, by the end of the year we had the COVID situation. But we even learned so much from that. If that same thing were to happen again, we'd be so much more ahead of the curve. I feel really good about this year because, as you know, our literacy scores are the best they've ever been in this state, the best they've ever been. Our math scores are getting better. We had some regression this year in 2nd and 3rd grade math. We're a little worried about that. But again, part of that I think is just that we focus so intensely on reading in those early grades that maybe we backed off just a little bit in some places on math. It's not enough regression to really worry about as long as it's not a trend. We want that to turn around. But if you look at 4th grade and up, we've had growth in math and in reading across the board. So I feel good about where we are with the basics. You know, we're going to be looking this year at a new graduation opportunity through the Pathways bill that passed the legislature in the spring. And so I think it's a really good time to be working in K-12, and it's going to be a good year.
It's good to hear. Let's talk about summer learning. I know that's been a big focus here in the state over the last several years. Talk about how that went, because it's such a critical component really to catching kids up and avoiding that learning loss, right?
Well, we had a good year of summer learning, especially in the early grades. You know, for the Literacy Act, we provide summer learning opportunities, especially for students who score below grade level on the test. But they're not the only ones that are invited to come to summer learning programs, and there's a lot of acceleration going on too. One of the things we saw this year, then this is a trend now for a couple of years, and it'll inform the way we plan in the future, is a lot of people show up for June, not so many people show up after the 4th of July for summer learning opportunities. And part of that is families are going on vacation, they have other things they want to do. So we think in the next year and beyond that, we're really going to focus our attention on the beginning of the summer. People seem to be, parents seem to be, they want a place for their kids to go in June, but again, we see them backing off of summer opportunities in July a little bit. And that's not true for all families, because a lot of families don't have a place for their kids to go. And so we're going to continue to offer opportunities throughout the summer, but really focusing early in the year. Participation this year seemed to be really good, and a lot of the stories I got back were that children enjoyed going to summer reading camps and math camps and STEM camps. I got to go down to Stillman College and visit with a group of high school students. I think they were all high school students. At Stillman last week, they were from all over the Black Belt Scholars Program, and I mean, they were hyped up and having a great time, and it was, I think, the next to last day for their program. So people are still excited about it, and also got to do some really neat experiments with those young people.
Mm-hmm. Let me ask you about funding, because I know that some of the COVID funds from the federal government helped pay for a lot of summer learning programs. Is that funding drying up? Are we going to be able to replace it, or how's that work?
So a lot of the funding's already been replaced by the legislature. We have paid for summer reading camps and math camps and some other programs with ESSER funds the last couple of summers and this summer. Next summer, there won't be any federal funds for that. The legislature went ahead and fully funded our summer math and reading camps. They've also given us a small line item. It's not real big, a couple $1 million, which is not much when you spread it out across the whole state, for other programs, after-school programs and summer programs. But that can help fund like high school programs, middle school programs, and we have a few other programs that are funded with public and private funds. But I would tell you, going forward, we're probably going to have to look at that because there is a demand, especially for after-school programs, but also for summer school programs for older students. And again, the Literacy and Math Acts are really focused on those youngest kids. Again, the program I went to at Stillman's a great example. We are able to put some money into that. There's also private funding that helps support those about 300 students, I think, that go to those summer camps. But in the end, there are a lot of students or a lot of families looking for a place for their students to go in the summer.
Mm-hmm. Let me ask you about the Literacy Act, because the accountability provision kicked in this year, and so letters went out to some families about students possibly being retained. How did that go? Because I know part of the summer programs also are aimed at if they weren't at grade level, reading at grade level, try to catch them up over summer before they go to fourth grade. So how did it all work?
Well, a lot of those students, thousands of them, did go to summer reading camps. We like to call them camps, not summer school. And they took the test, a separate test, but it's another reading test at the end of that. We don't have all those results back yet, but preliminary results are going to show that we're going to have some success. Obviously, those are the students who have reading challenges, or they wouldn't be identified. And so I don't think we're going to see 90% or 100% of those students pass the second test opportunity, but we do have some students who did pass. We'll have those numbers out next week. Parents are being notified right now about whether their children are being promoted through those tests. Some other good cause exemptions. So in the original round of testing, we had about 9% of students who tested below grade level. Last year it was about 17%, so we're headed in the right direction. And I'm going to predict that it's somewhere around 7% that actually could be held back. Again, some of those may be promoted on another good cause exemption. If they have an IEP, they're a special education student, they may be promoted on that special education status. Students that take what we call the alternate test, which means they're academically very low functioning. That's only 1% of our population. Obviously, we're not going to retain those students because really their school experience is not about reading as per se. So we'll look at the final numbers. By the middle of August, we'll have numbers, but I really feel very good about where we are. Considering the fact that we were about 23% below grade level, then last year 17%, this year 9%, tells me that our teachers are doing the work that we ask them to do to make sure that students are reading.
Mm-hmm. And at the end of the day, let's say it is that 7% or 9%, whatever, I mean, they're having trouble reading, and that's the whole point of the law, right, is to say, okay, you're going to need some more instruction. Y'all have talked about it as learning to read versus reading to learn, and that exactly kind of transition happens in fourth grade?
Yeah, that's right. So in fourth grade, you start doing more book work, old-fashioned we would say book work. You start reading a lot more in-depth materials, and of course that continues 5th, 6th, 7th grade and into high school. And so if students are not reading on grade level, they're going to really struggle through those middle grades in high school to read more complex text. We're talking about real textbooks. But there's also this group of students, I keep talking about them, who may test on grade level, but they're barely on grade level. And so, today they may be 1 point above the cut score, but tomorrow they might be 1 point below, and they might be 2 points above. So they're in that bubble area where they're going to really struggle no matter what. And we're really focusing on those students. We got $5 million from the legislature this year, and a new line item we're calling struggling readers, and it's really targeted toward those middle grades. We're going to roll that money out to the schools that have the most struggling readers in the middle grades, and we're going to be back asking for more money because we know that that's important to support those young readers in the way that they need to be supported.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned the legislature, and it strikes me that, if you go back decades, the conversation tended to all be about money, right? Yeah. The ETF, which of course is where everything gets started. Sure. So of course that's important. In recent years, though, so much is policy focused. You got the Literacy Act, you got the Numeracy Act. It seems like you have lawmakers, especially on those committees, that are really engaged on the details. Is that helpful to you as the superintendent to have legislators that aren't just worried about dollars and cents, but actual policy that helps improve instruction?
Yeah, we've seen this across the whole country, that there are big policy ideas moving through legislatures. Most of the states passed some sort of literacy reform in the last 5 years or so. I think in the Southeast, Georgia's the most recent one. It's just a little bit behind us. We were the first state that really passed some comprehensive mathematics reform, but we're seeing more and more states now starting to do that. West Virginia just passed something. I think ours is bolder and bigger than West Virginia's, but we're going to see more states working on mathematics. We see legislatures also focusing on high school graduates and what the experience beyond high school looks like. Again, back to the Pathways bill that moved through the legislature. So I think it's really good in that the legislature, we depend on them for funding, and they really want to fund programs that they buy into, that their constituents buy into. And so we get buy-in from the legislature, we get funding from the legislature. Obviously our state board is always concentrating on writing the rules for how that's going to play out in the schools, or really more of an implementation phase. And then of course what we're doing at the department is then we take the legislative work, the board's work, and we actually go out in the schools to make sure it gets done. So it's a hand in glove. It takes every level of government to get things done. The problem is when all those levels are pulling in different directions. And fortunately in Alabama we don't have to deal with that. We are all pulling in the same direction.
It hasn't always been that way. There's been some friction over the years. Well, while I've got you, we've got a little bit of time left. Like I said, we're getting back to school. Wonder if you have any tips for parents of school-age children of, as the school year begins, to make it really count, and maybe, tips for helping improve that instruction.
Yeah, well, I'm going to offer some tips. One really controversial and one not so controversial. So the first one, not controversial, read, especially if your children are third grade or below. You got to be reading with them, read to them, and let them read to you. We know that reading aloud is one of the best and most important ways that vocabulary develops. And of course, we want parents reading to children, well, I would say in utero, but certainly from the time they're born, to be reading with them. But as soon as children can begin doing some reading, whether that's a Dr. Seuss book, simple words, let students also start doing that reading. So you read to them, read with them, and then let students read to you. Practicing reading aloud is very important for young minds as they develop. So I'd say read. I would say if you got middle school students or high school students, this is a little controversial, but help us take those cell phones away from them. Access to cell phones during the school day we know is one of our major problems of discipline. It's a disciplinary problem. It can be a mental health problem because students are dealing with material they shouldn't be seeing. And I don't mean it's all inappropriate material, but they get text messages that upset them. They see social media posts that give them a feeling that only a certain perfect body is the only right body, and so they internalize that. We really need students on a lot less social media, and we need students not accessing their cell phones during the school day. And I've said this before, parents are as addicted to the cell phones as children are. Parents,
guilty.
Absolutely, all of us. And parents send their children a text message during the day, and the child's in class, they're in science class, but if they don't respond in 10 minutes, the parents think something's wrong. So we've really got to focus on getting our students off of cell phones, at least during the school day. Now, they're not at school. That's parents' business. I'm not going to get into parenting and how to raise children, but at school we don't need them on phones.
Yeah, some schools are starting to ban them, right, or have little pockets where you can go and deposit them. So.
Yeah, we've got probably more than a dozen school districts this coming year that plan to ban cell phones. We had about, I think, 5 or 6 last year. The largest of which was Montgomery County, and it's taken a hold across the country. I'm not the only person talking about it. We were one of the first states to bring it up as an issue, and we've been talking about it now for quite some time, but I think more and more folks are going to jump on that bandwagon.
I agree. Dr. Mackey, thanks again. Good luck on the start of a new school year, and we'll look forward to those updates.
Absolutely. Thank you.
We'll be right back.
You're watching Alabama Public Television.
Welcome back to Capitol Journal. Joining me next is Amanda Senn, Director of the Alabama Securities Commission. Amanda, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me. Always a pleasure to be here.
We all had this really interesting task force meeting this week here in the State House having to do with blockchain.
We did.
But it had a lot more to do with just blockchain because cryptocurrency came up, and I know that your organization is really involved in that. Before we dive into all that, can you remind our viewers of the role of the Securities Commission and how it helps prevent fraud around the state?
Thank you. I'm always happy to talk about the commission. I know we're a small agency, but we do so much. So our office is tasked with enforcing the securities laws, the money transmission laws. We have elder abuse laws that we enforce, and also industrial revenue bonds. On the securities side, we have a team of investigators. We're a law enforcement agency that take complaints from the public and from our financial institutions about suspected financial fraud. And so we have a team of investigators, and we also can take those cases and prosecute them criminally. On the money transmission side, we license PayPal, Venmo, Cash App. So any agency or organization that's involved in transmitting money on behalf of an individual, and this is where cryptocurrency has come in, oftentimes on the money transmission side. For the protection of vulnerable adults from financial exploitation, that's the name of the act, our office enforces that. And so what that does is require, and this was passed in partnership with our financial industry. So our legislature, working with our financial industry, said, you guys on the financial side, y'all see so much fraud. And so customers will come in, and these bank tellers, securities broker dealers, and investment advisors are saying, I know my client's being defrauded, but what can I do about it? Because there are privacy laws in place. Well, now they can delay those transactions that they know are transactions that will ultimately be in the hands of fraudsters, and report it, so we can intervene early before the money is lost to fraudsters. So we see reports from across the state, hundreds each year from financial institutions that are looking out for our seniors in the prevention of fraud. And so that's just in a nutshell what our agency does, but we oversee the investment industry generally and license the professionals and the products that are in our state to ensure integrity in our markets.
Yeah, I remember during a previous visit you telling some of those stories, some of the heartbreaking stories about fraud and particularly elderly folks being taken advantage of. And so let's talk about this crypto blockchain thing, because I'll admit I don't completely understand it. I think most Alabamians probably don't. But look, this is going on, right? People are trading and buying and doing things with blockchain. Can you first kind of explain the difference between blockchain, which I guess was supposed to be talked about today, and then the cryptocurrency? How are those different?
Sure, and that's there's a lot of confusion around blockchain. It's not synonymous with cryptocurrency and other digital assets. So some of the other digital assets are NFTs, which is a term that many have heard, non-fungible tokens, but both of those are sort of created on the blockchain. And the blockchain is like the digital ledger that allows digital assets to be transacted. And it's not a centralized mechanism. So like a bank would be an intermediary for financial transactions. Well, the blockchain has a system of computers, and so they relay the information and validate the transactions or prove their authenticity, much like a bank would approve a transaction and send it on. So blockchain is the digital ledger that allows for the recording of the transactions and the transmission of the digital assets that are held in that technology. And so we were excited that our legislature formed a blockchain study committee. We met this week. Senator Albritton agreed to serve as the chair of the committee, and he had us rolling very quickly, and everyone has assignments. So the state of Alabama now, with all of our stakeholders in the state, private industry as well, and all interested parties were represented, will take a very close look at the technology and the cryptocurrency industry, and to see how that best fits Alabama and the public. We agreed to divide into subcommittees. So we'll have a group that's a consumer-focused group. We'll have a group that's looking at the blockchain technology and how it might be useful to our industry, both in the public sector and the private sector. And we'll have another group, I believe, that is focused on maybe uses of blockchain technology and possibly like how crypto assets could be useful within our economy.
That's interesting. But again, your organization really investigates and prosecutes fraud. And I'm just thinking, with this whole new world of cryptocurrency, blockchain and all that, with so much misunderstanding and lack of education about it, there certainly would be a potential for fraud in terms of scammers and others out there trying to take advantage of that ignorance folks might have to sell them a bill of goods. Is that part of why y'all are in this conversation, to make sure that the regulations meet the moment in terms of the technology?
Absolutely. That's one of the more important reasons we're involved. So about 10 years ago, and I've been with the agency for almost 16 years, cryptocurrency started coming up. Just the name cryptocurrency, the terms associated with cryptocurrency.
Bitcoin and whatnot.
Bitcoin, yeah, Ethereum, and there were just a few at the time. But the white paper on Bitcoin was published in 2008. And so around 2010, we started hearing about a company called Mt. Gox. And they served as a crypto exchange. And exchanges are what the Securities Commission is responsible for overseeing. So securities, firms, exchanges that pop up, or any type of financial firm that engages in investment type activity. So when Mt. Gox came up, the securities industry, began really focusing on crypto assets. And ultimately Mt. Gox was hacked, and so millions of dollars were lost to fraudsters. And so the investors with the company and the consumers were, deeply affected financially by the loss here. And so Mt. Gox was operating like a securities exchange, but of course our interest is to make sure that industry is fairly regulated across the board. But they weren't complying with the protocols that are required of securities firms. So all financial industry, the regulated industry, banks, credit unions, depository institutions, securities firms, and the financial advisory industry has to comply with cybersecurity procedures to ensure that customers and investors that are depositing money with them aren't losing money to cyber attacks because of the institutions or the organizations neglect with regard to their cyber practices. And so, it's to minimize the risk. I know it's impossible to prevent all types of security breaches and hacks, but to minimize those risks, there are procedures. There are also procedures required to prevent money laundering. So we don't want our financial institutions to be used to launder money through criminals. And so there are procedures in place that detect and prevent money laundering through our systems. The ultimate goal, of course, is to maintain a financial payment system that consumers and investors, those transacting business with our institutions, can trust. And so we want to maintain the integrity of our payment systems and of our capital markets in general. So the laws that apply to our financial institutions, it's our position that these firms that are popping up around cryptocurrency need to play by the same rules. And so there's not a disparity in the cryptocurrency industry versus the regulated financial community. But back to your question, so Mt. Gox came up, and that sort of the first experience that the regulators and regulated industry had with regard to an institution that kind of performed like a financial institution.
Yeah. There was some conversation in this meeting this week about emerging technologies and kind of our history with it. And as the internet came along, scams, of course, abound. Same thing with just social media and things like that. And all along the way, laws, regulations had to be adapted. I mean, some of this stuff is still being talked about, especially with social media, in terms of keeping up with the technology, and not being afraid of the technology, because some of this can be really helpful, as you've discussed.
Oh, yeah.
But making sure that, again, we're adapting and not letting technology overcome our ability to protect consumers.
Right. And so you mentioned the technology. Someone said in the audience yesterday at a fraud seminar, our office hosts several fraud seminars throughout the state, can we use technology to take out the fraudsters? And I thought, well, yes, we can, and we do. So technology can be useful. We love Siri, we love Alexa, we love the streamlined processes, but the fraudsters capitalize on anything new, and they, I say they rip the frauds out of the headlines every day. So combating fraud is an ongoing battle, and it's impossible to eliminate and eradicate fraud from every system and every industry, but there are, like I said, the procedures that financial firms have to follow. that could be applied to crypto industry and should be applied so that our folks here in Alabama aren't losing millions of dollars to these fraudsters. And our office has been investigating many of these crypto-related cases for about 10 years. And so when the consumers call us, when the investing public calls us, they say, well, we put the cryptocurrency in either a Bitcoin ATM, or we were instructed to this website that purported to be a legitimate financial institution, and I've just lost a lot of money. Can you help me? So we're able to trace it out, but we can see it immediately going overseas, and it's impossible at this point, and that's where the committee can be very helpful in discussing the issues surrounding where to put procedures in place to help prevent some of the fraudulent activity, so our members of our public can continue to trust, and maintain the integrity of our payment systems. That's the ultimate goal. Mm-hmm.
Something to watch for sure going forward, and I'll do my best to understand better what's going on. Before we let you go, I know that y'all have been working with Innovate Alabama, a group that we've been covering a lot here on Capital Journal, on some projects. Talk about this. So
we're excited to be working with Innovate Alabama to develop rules within our organization to help facilitate capital formation. So that's a part of what the Alabama Securities Commission is responsible for, protecting folks from fraud and maintaining integrity in our capital markets and assisting with capital formation. So we have certain rules and exemptions in place to allow, for example, startups to raise money quickly, so we can help the tech industry, which is largely what the startups are right now, get off the ground and help prosper this new technology and these entrepreneurs in our state that want to help get their products out. And so we passed a rule, a private fund advisor exemption, that allows those that are managing private funds to be exempt from some of the regulations that were imposed on individuals that were managing larger funds. So this is for individuals that would be taking advantage of Innovate Alabama's grant program, and so we can quickly get those dollars in the hands of individuals and hopefully get investors to match these funds and help to grow these young entrepreneurs. But the private fund advisor rule does alleviate some of the paperwork. I know everybody says cut the red tape, but so I know the regulatory process isn't always easy, but we believe there were enough consumer protections in place to allow relief in this area of private funds. We're excited about working with Innovate Alabama on that. Thank you.
Sounds like some good news. We're out of time, Amanda, but thanks again for taking time out of your very busy schedule, and look forward to having you back on soon.
Thanks always for having me, Todd.
We'll be right back.
You can watch past episodes of Capital Journal online at video.aptv.org. Capital Journal episodes are also available on APTV's free mobile app. You can also connect with Capital Journal and link to past episodes on Capital Journal's Facebook page. And you can listen to past episodes of Capital Journal when you're driving or on the go with Capital Journal podcasts.
Welcome back to Capital Journal. Joining me next is the Secretary of Commerce, Ellen McNair, and Deputy Secretary of Commerce, Bob Smith. Thanks for coming on the show.
Yes, thank you for having us.
Well, I wanted to talk, it's an exciting time for economic development in Alabama. And Ellen, last time you were on, you talked about developing a new strategic plan for the state's economic development system. How's that going? And can you give a kind of a general update on projects that are maybe in the works?
Right, so the strategic plan is underway, well underway. It is the one thing that Governor Ivey asked me to accomplish when I took this job back in January. So we have been working with a huge team, getting input and putting together both the quantitative part of the strategic plan and getting input from around the state on the qualitative part. So we are well underway. We will have that delivered to the governor October 1st.
Okay. And what about projects? I know that y'all have got a pretty heavy load in terms of what you're trying to accomplish, but can you give a general update on how that's going?
Absolutely. So currently we have well over 100 projects in our pipeline that represent over $25 billion of capital investment and over 30,000 jobs. Now, of course, we will not win, maybe, but we will not win all of those projects by any means, but it is a great pipeline. It's a very strong pipeline, and we're working with communities around the state to try to win those projects.
And I want to talk about the community part of it in a minute, but Bob, you've just returned from the Farnborough Air Show in England. I know this is like an annual thing. It kind of flip-flops between Paris and London, right?
Every other year.
Yeah. So talk about this. What goes on at the Farnborough Air Show, and especially the Alabama contingent that makes an appearance?
Okay. First, it's not the air show like you might be accustomed to, with flying, but there are airplanes that fly, but it's business. It's business meetings, and what's flying are usually could be as mundane as a 737 showing off some wingtips for the first time. But it's mostly for business, and it's a world showcase for every aerospace and aviation company in the world, either there or Paris every year. And so it's one place where you can find the C-suite of just about every aerospace or aviation company in the world, all in one place. And so it provides great opportunities for networking and having meetings with, high-level decision makers. So.
Well, I'm just thinking, going back decades, really, the aviation and aerospace industry in Alabama has really just blossomed, and you've been there for most of it. I'm guessing that meetings like that at the air show provide that one-on-one contact, not just with American companies, but with European companies. I'm thinking of Airbus and EADS, how that relationship got started back in the 2000s.
Exactly. All the foreign, many foreign companies. I think there are 27 international expos there. We're a collection of companies, and so it's a very international event. So it's it's melting pot for all over the world right there. So.
We'll talk about the aviation and aerospace industry, both of you, because between what's going on in Huntsville, which is very well known, but now Mobile, they're celebrating, I think, their 500th airplane at Airbus this week. Just a really blossoming industry in Alabama, and talk about how that happened, because it just more so than other states seems to be really thriving here.
Well, to go back to Huntsville, of course, when the rocket team came in 1949, and of course that started a defense industry with propulsion technology. NASA has 3 legs, mission control, launch, and we design and do the propulsion technology there in Huntsville, Alabama. So it started there, the defense built, and so we have a very diverse aviation industry across the state. We have the largest rotorcraft training center in the world at Fort Novisville. But we're lacking in commercial aviation, and that's where Airbus filled that gap. And so coming in, producing the first plane, flying it in 2016, and as soon as they get up to their rate, their target rate of 16 per month, we'll be the 4th largest aviation production line in the world.
How about that?
Yeah, that's really amazing.
Really is.
And I'd like to just say, in preparation, I really want to commend the Commerce team, and really led by Bob, for the preparation that it takes to go to these air shows. It is months of work, and there were at least 4 different members of his team that worked for many months putting together a very detailed meeting schedule, trying to get on agendas from companies around the world. So the lead time, the work, you don't just walk into those shows without preparation. So I do want to commend Bob and the Commerce team for all the hard work leading the Alabama delegation to the air show, and the amount of work that it took to make that trip a success. So.
Absolutely, and we'll look forward to the fruits maybe down the road.
We hope.
Speaking of that, so the legislature this year, passed a series of economic development related bills. A lot of them had to do with workforce and everything, and we'll get to that. But I'm thinking of the SEEDS Act.
Right.
Really trying to give local areas more support for developing their own economic development projects. Talk about that, because it seems like this is starting to get into motion. They passed the bills, but they've actually got to be implemented.
Absolutely, yeah. So, we're really a victim of our own success, because the success of the last few years in economic development really left us without a lot of product. We really didn't have a lot of prepared and ready sites because so many successes that happened the last few years and companies have come in and located on those sites. So really in my career, which has spanned many years, this is the lowest inventory that we've really ever had of industrial sites. So these, both the seeds legislation and the Growing Alabama that has been there for a while, both help local communities to develop and prepare new industrial sites. So we're really seeing that take off now. We funded approximately 20 projects with the seeds and another 7 or 8 with Growing Alabama recently. So very excited to get those projects up and running and get those sites into inventory so Bob and the project managers have something to market and sell.
Mm-hmm. I like the way you put that, victim of your own success, because yeah, the sites, the mega sites, even the local sites,
yeah.
Are getting snatched up, right?
Oh, absolutely.
That's a good problem to have, I suppose.
Yeah, it is a good problem, but then you're not prepared for the next project and the next opportunity to come along. So it is very important to do the work, and sometimes that takes years to prepare those sites. It doesn't happen overnight, and it really takes a team to pull that together. It really needs to be led by the locals because they're in their communities, they understand where that land and available infrastructure is, but they need the support of the state. And so that's what those two programs, Seeds and Growing Alabama, are there to support their efforts.
Well, speaking of the legislature, you know, they did pass this series of workforce development bills and really a reorganization of Alabama's workforce platform, so to speak, taking it from kind of a siloed system to maybe a more streamlined system that's going to be obviously intertwined quite a bit with commerce. Do you see that helping in terms of improving how we go about workforce development? Because ultimately you've got to have a workforce to sell to companies, right?
Right. And I think that programs on its own have been very successful. Obviously, AIDT is one of the top training programs in the country, but it is an incentive. It's really not a long-term workforce development entity. It's there to incentivize companies and get them up and running.
Right.
But I'm excited to see, of course, it is going to be a process, about a year-long process to get this reorganization up and running. So, you know, it's always great to take a look at how you can do things better, how you can improve. So I'm excited to be able to, you know, be a part and support in any way that Commerce can, that this effort to reorganize and to try to make it a more efficient delivery.
Mm-hmm. Well, Bob, so much gets said about incentives, right? Because that's where the dollar signs are, and so everybody, you know, kind of looks at that. Every time a project's announced, that's the first thing everybody wants to see. But I'm curious, when you're talking with executives, when you're talking to maybe site selectors and folks like that, I'm sure incentives come up, but there are other factors too, like workforce, like the local area and things like that. Talk about the factors beyond the dollar signs that go into a company's decision on where they're going to locate.
Well, you've already talked about workforce. It doesn't matter how many incentives you get if you can't get the workforce. That doesn't matter. And so, but it does come up, and it comes up early and often, and we just have to work through that because we know that most of the time decisions are not made there, but companies do want to talk incentives, and especially site selectors. And but the workforce is key. You know, sites, you know, follows that, and, you know, finding the right product and for their market. You know, it doesn't do any good to have a perfect site if it's outside of the region they're looking to serve, if that's important to them. But workforce is right now the key item that everyone has to solve. Everybody has a workforce problem. We're not alone here. It's whoever has the best solution to that, and that's what we're working hard to do, to find the right solution. And like I say, AIDT and our 2-year college system are really, really working very hard right now to provide the best solution.
Yeah, we've had Ed on the show a couple of times. And, yeah, just a veteran and an innovator his whole career at AIDT.
Yeah,
huge tool in the toolbox.
We're very fortunate. There's not another state that I know of that has a program that does what Ed's program does.
We talked about how Alabama is not alone in addressing workforce problems. And that's interesting to me because, yeah, we are in competition with other states. And so you've seen the legislature go back and revise our economic development statutes. I guess the last one was 2015. There have been some revisions since then. Talk about how important it is to revise those statutes, to keep them modern, and to not fall behind, because after all, we are in competition with other states.
As far as the incentives are concerned, it should be a continuing process. We're always looking, comparing ourselves to best practices around the country. Part of the strategic plan is exactly that, really taking a look at what our incentives are, how they compete with other states, and just the continuing process of refining those and updating those to stay competitive.
Mm-hmm. Well, we will be paying attention when that strategic plan is delivered to the governor.
Exciting.
We'll have you back on to maybe explain some of those finer points. Well, look, Bob, Ellen, thanks so much for coming on and explaining some of this, and we'll look forward to having you back on soon.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
We'll be right back.
You can watch past episodes of Capital Journal online anytime at Alabama Public Television's website, aptv.org. Click on the Online Video tab on the main page. You can also connect with Capital Journal and link to past episodes on Capital Journal's Facebook page.
That's our show for this week. Thanks for watching. We'll be back next week at the same time, right here on Alabama Public Television. For our Capital Journal team, I'm Todd Stacy. We'll see you next time.